Have you just been asked to run a global project and you are excited yet maybe slightly nervous? Well, don't worry, because in this video, I'm going to share with you things that people just don't think about when it comes to global projects, but is going to be critical for your success. Shift your mindset about time. Now that you're working on global projects, you're going to have multiple team members in multiple time zones because that's where they live and that's where they're going to be doing their work. And you're not going to get instant answers. So you now have to start shifting your mindset around time, not to something that's immediate or in a few hours, but you have to now think in 24-hour windows, because it's really going to be dependent upon where you are. A lot of global projects have individuals that are either on the East Coast, West Coast, over in Asia, really depending on where it is. So now you can have time zone shifts of 3 hours all the way up to 12 hours. So you now have to think differently. Do not expect instant answers, because you may be sleeping when someone is asking you a question and vice versa. Or if you have something that is due, don't make it be due immediately. This is why you have to have really good project planning, because your whole time zone aspect of things really shifts your perspective on time and how you're going to interact with your global team members. If you need help building the right skill set and knowledge for your global projects, I have something for you. It's a free webinar on important 5 fundamentals that you definitely need for any type of project, let alone a global project. So I would highly recommend you sign up for it and check it out. It's free for you. There's a link right under this video. Go right now and check it out. Shift your perspective on meetings. All right, we already have a time zone issue, right? So now we have to rethink how we look at our meetings, because the meeting time and date that you pick may not work for everyone. If you have a global team, and depending on where you are, and let's say you're on the West Coast and you want to have a 9 o'clock meeting on a Friday, which a lot of people say don't do that, but sometimes stuff happens. I was about to say something else. Sometimes stuff happens. Are you really going to expect someone that's in India to actually be on that call when it's going to be 10 hours ahead in the evening on a Friday? Absolutely not. So you really have to think differently with your meetings. So your meetings have to be fair to everybody. So I like to set up in my kickoff of my project with my global team, talking about how exactly we want to handle our meetings and the fairness of meetings. So a lot of times we'll set up a regular scheduled interval of a meeting, whether we need it or not. Why? Because trying to find with a global team a meeting time that works for everyone is almost impossible. And if you can't find something that everyone agrees to, then you may have to alternate. So maybe for 3-4 weeks, you do it on this, the 8 o'clock meeting for one team is in the morning, and for the other part of the team is going to be in the evening, and then maybe you swap those out. Now you have to plan all that stuff. You can't do it on the fly, because as we all know, people's schedules get filled up quite quickly. So you have to, at your kickoff, organize all of this with your project team members and tell them to accept it all, which kind of goes against a lot of things that I talk about, which is scheduling recurring meetings just for the sake of having a meeting. But no, that's not going to be the case, because now you're going to rethink a little bit differently even more. You're trying to, by having your reoccurring meetings with your project team who's global, you're just securing the time slot, okay? It's not to say you're actually going to have a meeting with everybody. Now what's going to happen is you have to be proactive about your meetings, have your agenda set out in your meetings in advance, so that by Thursday, for the following week, because again, that time zone, there may be some people that it's their Friday when you send it on the Thursday, and you can't expect people to take a look at things on the weekend. So on Thursday, you're going to be very clear whether or not you need that reoccurring meeting. Very clear. And if you don't, you're going to use that meeting, you're going to repurpose it for something else, either some one-on-ones, because guess what? People already have it booked off on their calendar, or maybe it's a smaller team that you have to bring together to brainstorm a certain idea. You just want to really save that time, but be very proactive in whether or not you're going to cancel it or repurpose it. And you have to do it. So you now have to get really good when it comes to your meetings and having agendas and being very clear with what you want to do. But it is important, because global teams, you just have the time zone, and trying to fit everyone's schedule is almost impossible. So definite must get really good at your meetings. So if you want to know how to set all this up in the kickoff meeting, like I said a little bit earlier in this tip, well, definitely check out my course, Slay Project Management, because I go in depth in regards to the kickoff meeting and how to set it up and to set up all of those definite needs that you have to have with your project moving forward. Consider the culture of your global team. You now have an international team. This goes hand in hand with time zones, by the way. So I love this book, The Culture Map. She does an amazing job, Erin, of explaining all the different cultures. I've actually talked about this book before in my YouTube videos as well. And I find it so helpful because for those of you, let's say, who are from a North American culture, we have a very distinct culture. Just like every other culture has a distinct culture. And as per Erin is what she says in the book, with North Americans, and think about this in your own experience, where it's to the point, what we say is what we mean. We take action items and notes and we're following up constantly. And there's this kind of process to it. Whereas what she's also suggesting is some European cultures are a little bit different. And this has all to do with the culture itself, how long the culture has been around, how long the language has been around. It's quite fascinating because it really dictates behavior of people. And as I was saying, for some European cultures, they actually, and I've had this myself, they actually don't like when the North American culture says, okay, we're going to capture these notes. Let's make sure that everyone understands, and the repetition of it, because in their mind's eye, it's like, look, I told you I was going to do it. I'm going to do it. Why are you micromanaging me? When in essence, from a North American culture, we're not micromanaging. And now even take it a step further to some Asian cultures, because the language is so ancient. The culture has been around for so long. There's now these hidden nuances, so much so where even a hierarchy and where you are in that hierarchy gains respect, and whether or not I'm going to speak up and actually say anything or not. In a newer culture like North America, Americans and Canadians, for example, yeah, we're speaking up all the time. Yes, we have hierarchy, but not to the point where I'm not going to, as let's say the leader of the organization coming into the team saying, I need your opinion, and then we shoot out opinions. In some Asian cultures, that would be very disrespectful. You don't do that. You do not say to the leader, oh my God, I'm going to challenge you, or tell you your idea is not good, or to shoot out those ideas. There's a process to it without even realizing that it's there, because it's the culture. So you need to definitely take a moment, understand the different cultures so that you can change your approach. And that's what I've had to do. So there are some individuals on my team, just from a culture perspective, I may have to have more one-on-ones. I may have to prep them with what's going to be happening. I may have to change my approach when I do my meetings, just so I can ensure there's that consistency and that we're all moving forward. And have patience, right? Because of the time, we have to think of time differently, because now cultures are also different too. It may take a little bit longer. You may not have that instantaneous and getting things done like this, like you're used to, which is probably why you got this global project. You are going to have to shift your way of thinking because of culture. It's huge. Create a central location for all of your documents. This is a must, okay? You can't have people working off their own computer. There's a couple reasons for this. Why? You're on different time zones. Someone may have a question. They may need to access something. They need it immediately because they're working, but guess what? You're sleeping and you have it on your hard drive. Now time is going by and they're not working on what needs to be done. So this is really just, in my personal opinion, best practice for projects anyway, is to have some sort of shared drive that everyone has access to. Be very clear though, ensure that when you create these shared drives, you have to manage it. They will not manage on their own. You have to keep it clean and neat as the project manager. That's your job. And then version control is going to be really important, because even though everyone is working a little more independently because of time zones and, when they're working. So when they have access to something, you want to make sure they're working on the right document. So your version control in your shared drive or your SharePoint site is going to be critical. So you need to establish all of that and really have a good set of rules when you have your one place that everyone is supposed to go to. and ensure that they're dropping their documents off into when they're done creating them as well. Because I'm not a fan of creating my documents in a SharePoint site. I find it has a little more nuancy things to it. I'll create the draft on my laptop, but then I'll move it over. So you may want to, as part of your meetings, something that, again, if I had a local team, I wouldn't even talk about, but for a global team, I would talk a little bit about housekeeping. Okay, guys, 5 minutes on it. All right, let's just talk about the SharePoint site. Everyone have their latest documents updated in it. By the way, I made some changes. I was just cleaning it up. You're going to have to talk to that so everyone understands the importance of that. Less is more when it comes to documentation, when it comes to global teams. Now, you may be scratching your head. Adriana, I don't get it. It's a global project. It's a complex project. There's a lot that's going on. Yes, I get it. But you have the added layer of different teams, different cultures, different time zones, and trying to ensure when you don't have the ability, because you're a local team, to be able to resolve things quickly, you're all on the same time zone, to address things, to brainstorm things. And if you're lucky, you're in the same building or you're, again, have the ability to connect immediately. So you really have to think through about your documentation. Funny enough, have less documentation. I still have documentation, but I have less documentation on my global teams. That is mandatory. All right. I may have a little bit more on my local teams because, again, I can access my team members a lot faster and address issues a lot faster. So there's a bare minimum that I usually have with my global team. Now you're going to have to figure out what that is. Okay. Good news is in my Slay project management course, I actually go into that and share with you what some of those bare minimums are. So if you're interested in that, you can always check it out. The link is underneath this video. But you want to make sure that, because you have different cultures, different ways of working, that everyone is in agreement to the type of documentations that you're going to do. And how do you do that? You do that at the kickoff meeting. This is why your kickoff is so important, is everyone comes to agreement as to how we're going to work our time zones, our meetings, the documentation, the SharePoint site, how we're going to do our version control. Set that all up immediately. And again, don't overdo it, because you have different time zones and you're going to have to follow up with people and be patient trying to get those answers. That's why less is more. Build trust virtually. If you have a global team, that means you probably are doing your project virtually. Great, that's fine, but it has its challenges. Locally, you have the ability to see people, to call them immediately. Maybe if you're all in the building at the same time, if you have hybrid workforce going on, then you can connect that way in person. You don't have that luxury when it comes to global teams. You will have people who you'll only see virtually. And we all know, as great as working virtually can be, it has its issues. And part of that issue is connectivity. It's really hard to connect with someone who you've never met through a screen, all right? I'm hoping you're connecting with me, but let's be honest, are we really connecting? We have this screen, and worse yet, when you have meetings and people don't put on their camera and then you don't even know how they look. It's really, really hard. So it's not to say you can't be done or you can't get past that hump, but you have to think a little bit differently. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll ask my team, please, are you okay to have camera on? Why? Because again, I've talked about emotional intelligence. I talked about connectivity. We get so much more information through looking at someone and seeing their facial expressions than we do verbally what they're saying. So having the camera on with virtual teams is really important. Establish that ASAP at your kickoff when everyone's getting together and everyone's agreeable. And tell them why. Because I don't know you. I want to be able to understand you. I want us to connect. The second thing that you really want to think about is build into your budget, maybe a couple times within your project, depending on how long it is, bringing the team together. A really great project has a gelling team, and the best way to gel as a team is to actually interact with people in person, right? Totally makes a big difference. Now, if you know everybody on your global team and you've met them in person before, then you have an advantage with the virtual, right? Because you've already met each other. But most people don't have that advantage. And so it becomes really important to build that into your budget. And then do some things to build trust as well. Now, when you're busy in a project and virtual and you don't have a lot of time and you only have X amount of meetings with everyone because everyone's on a different time zone, you do not want to be wasting, and I say this with a grain of salt because I do see the value in team building activities, group activities, but you're going to have to get people to open up so you can connect with them since you don't have the ability to do it in person. One of the techniques that I've done with my global teams in the past, which is very, very quick, it allows for people to get to know their team members, and their team member gets to express to everybody else, hey, this is what's really important to me, is I will do a inspirational quote. Okay, everybody, we're going to rotate once a week at a meeting. Everyone do an inspirational quote. It takes 5 minutes. They share their quote and we get insight to the person, why they chose it. That's the quote we use. And then we use it within our meetings too. Like we'll kind of use it in a fun way. Like we'll take that quote, we'll put it into any presentation that we're doing that particular week so that we can share what that person has done. And then that person picks the next person who's going to do the inspirational quote. And we rotate that. I actually take them, save them, put them on the SharePoint site so that we can go back to them. And there's other things like that. Something that's going to take 3 minutes. Even ask them, what's your favorite song? And why? And they can play it for 15 seconds and then they can explain to you why they love that song so much. It's a simple team building activity without it really being a team building activity, without it taking up much time, but really opens up so you understand your team members even more, which is going to help with building trust. Don't forget to save your seat for my free training that I spoke about earlier on. How can you do that? The link is below this video. Make sure you watch this next video where I teach you how to lead a project when your team members report into other managers and the best way to do that. On that note, like this video, join this community, please subscribe, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Until the next video, see you later.